All right, we're back with another episode of Deconstructing Health and Fitness with Liz and Chris. And today we have another special guest. She's Dina, and she's the nutrition mechanic. We met at a gym. Actually, we were working out together, and we kind of figured out that there was some common interest here. And I thought she'd be a fantastic person to come on and talk to us a little bit about nutrition in fitness and women's nutrition, as well as just talking a little bit about registered dietitians and why you should seek one out. So I'm going to turn the mic over to her and have her give a little bit more background on herself. So take it away, Dina.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Liz, having me on with you. I'm honored. So happy to be with you and chat. Anything that comes up, nutrition and this whole realm is so important to be talking about. I'm Dina Griffin here in Boulder, Colorado, but I mostly work with endurance athletes. My focus in the last few years has been more in the realm of working with women, and specifically I'll call it the masters population, but really, anyone, but specifically more in the 40 and older subset. The range of women and medical conditions varies from everything from prediabetes to type 2 diabetes, metabolic issues, heart, cardiovascular health. But my main focus is trying to optimize nutrition in line with the individual's goals, keeping in mind the longevity aspect. So it's an acute and more long-term approach that I have. So I'm not really into any of the, fad diets. I'm always looking for the sustainable patterns that work for the individual and really looking at that personalized level of nutrition, which I know you both appreciate well, how nuanced some of these things can be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, in essence, it's sports nutrition, but it's working with a variety of individuals and looking to meet you where you are instead of trying to pigeonhole into a box, to follow this plan or that plan. It's really looking at the person and their needs and their goals.
I think this is why you're such an important guest to have on, right? Because I think maybe a good place to start with this is what is the difference between a registered dietitian and a nutrition coach? Because I know what it is and you know what it is, but I think it's very confusing for people when they're coming into health or fitness or sport for the first time. They don't necessarily know what the difference between all of these things are.
Yeah, and it's great to repeat the messaging. And I think it's something that I've come to appreciate even more, that we have to be careful to judge based on, the 2-word credential or the 2-word description, right? Because there are excellent professionals, whether it's a nutrition coach or a registered dietitian, but it's really looking at what are we trying to improve or remedy or work with. So the registered dietitian can come into the picture more when specifically there is a medical condition and we need some medical nutrition therapy. The background of, as far as education and credentialing, can be, or is, I should say, more extensive with that path, that professional path. So, I kind of joke, Chris, like, oh, if an orange has vitamin C, you're a nutritionist, like you're in. And I'm not trying to be snarky, but it sounds that way. But it's like really anyone can call themselves a nutrition coach. However, as you appreciate too, there are a number of different programs out there, like the Precision Nutrition Company, that have excellent programs. It's just that the difference then with the RD path is, a 1,000-hour internship, and now we're moving to a master's degree being required, and licensure and all of these other things to go through. So, but I think in essence, sometimes it's looking at if it's a medical condition or something more advanced where we need some extensive biochemistry background or some other education in that realm to treat the person. That's where the RD comes in even more.
I think that's a really important word that you used, treat, because I think this is where it really does there needs to be a fork. And I, as a nutrition coach, as somebody who takes my education in this area very seriously, right? Like, I'm extremely careful, and I tell people right up front, like, I'm not the food priest, right? You don't have to come to me and confess your food sins. 2, I'm not going to give you a meal plan. Like, that is not my role, and that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to help you change behaviors. I'm here to help you look at patterns, and I'm here to help you make choices that align with what you want to be doing and your goals. I'm not here to help you treat diabetes, right? That's where a registered dietitian would come in. So if you have a health condition and you also have a nutritionist, and I'll put that in air quotes because, like you said, I like that. If you know there's vitamin C in an orange, you can call yourself a nutritionist. Then that's outside of the scope of that person's job. And if you have a nutrition coach, knowing that they have a referral network of people for extra situations, I think is really important to understand, because it's tempting. I think it's tempting once you have a client who you trust and you like and you want to help. It's easy to overstep and say, oh, well, I can help with all of these things. But there are people who are more specialized towards this, right? Like, I look at the nutrition coach as a gatekeeper to other health professionals who can do the more deep work that we uncover in the initial part of what I'm doing with a client, right?
That's fantastic. I wish we had more of you, Chris, out in the world, but we'll take you.
We're working on it.
It's fantastic.
We're working on it, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, and there are RDs who, we also have to mind our scope of practice, right? So it goes both ways in that whole realm. But definitely, I have seen cases where maybe the nutrition coach, got into an aspect that maybe wasn't appropriate. And so I think this is all part of education, just like when we go to a physical therapist or other massage therapists, you name the professional, just what is their expertise and ability, and really doing our homework.
Yeah, and who are they as a person, right? Because I think this is the tricky part. Yeah. Because within every field, there are excellent professionals and there are less excellent professionals, right? So learning to vet them as well, learning to know what to look for is really why we're here. So it's the whole point of this podcast, right? Is to sort of help people have a better barometer of, like, what do I really need, and how is this serving me? Is it serving me? Is this really for profit and not mine, right? For their profit. How does that play out in the long run? And I think something you said as well when we were talking before about looking at sustainability, right? Like, I think for a long time, the idea was like, I need to lose weight fast and devil the consequences. Or what's that expression? What's it? Oh, come on, Liz, you know this one. Damn the consequences.
You're saying, damn the consequences. The consequences be damned.
That's it. Thank you.
So, like, as long as I get down to the certain weight, I'm sure I can maintain it, even though I did extreme lifestyle changes. I'm sure those are just going to stick around.
Yeah. And then that cycle kind of continues, right? And then I have a personal story about this and how I ended up on this path in the first place was I was living in France and I went to a dietitian. I was deep, dark into the world of bodybuilding and keto diets and carbs being evil and all of this stuff. And I went because I was still not convinced I was getting lean enough, which in hindsight was absurd. I went to a registered dietitian looking for help. And when she told me to eat bread, I discredited her. I thought, well, she can't possibly know what she's talking about, because no nutrition person in their right mind would tell me to eat bread. And I think it speaks to the misinformation and the power of the marketing and the misinformation around the diet industry, that even somebody who was incredibly committed to learning and applying the things that I thought were healthy could be misled to this degree.
It's super important that you're bringing that up. I have stories like that from my own journey too, and others. It can be confusing, like who to go to. And then when you take into consideration our own histories, what we were taught as we were raised, and the environments in which we were in, and our cultural influences, society, all of those things, it can be quite overwhelming in so many ways, right? To figure out, and then with our belief system, and being then given different messages from someone who maybe has the credentials, like, well, is this real? Or I'm going to put that person aside because it doesn't align with my beliefs. Then we have a whole other, path that we're taking.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation around belief systems in nutrition as well, like, because it becomes almost a religion, right? Whatever diet you're doing can become like a somewhat religious and personal thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But everyone seems to be okay with commenting on it, like on what you're eating, it's really hard to, speaking from that female standpoint of, I feel like I cannot hang around any woman without them critiquing what they're eating and commenting about their own diet, and usually in a very toxic way, or anything that they want to eat. So it's kind of like, even though you're a specialist, Dina, and Chris is also a specialist, it's hard because you get inundated with all this information from people who are not. And it's so overwhelming. So I'm super happy to have you and Chris here and talking about this, because we need a way to kind of move aside all the misinformation, all the information that's not helpful.
I mean, it speaks to the power of anecdotal evidence, right? Like, my friend did the keto diet and lost 30 pounds and looked super happy now, right? Like,
everyone I know who did the keto diet lost 30 pounds and then they gained 60 back or something.
Oh, we got an eye roll out of Dina. She's got something to say about that.
No, I'm just relating to even what I hear, people who don't know what I do. And Liz, what you're saying too, just hanging out with different people, like that comes up so often in social.
Oh, you froze. She'll be back.
We'll edit this out.
Yeah, that's fine.
It wasn't me. I thought it was me. I was like, oh no, here it goes.
Well, it's not me either because mine's still going. It must be her video.
Yeah.
Okay, if she drops, we can always pick it back up.
Yeah.
There you are. Oh, almost. Oh, we can't hear you.
Conversation.
Oh, wait, there we go.
There we go. Sorry, your video froze for a minute.
My apologies.
That's okay. So
you were just saying, you were just saying,
just saying
how it's so prevalent.
Liz, what you're saying, just when I'm around people who don't even know what I do for work, and how often the dieting conversation comes up, or the weight loss story, or this worked for so-and-so, and should I try this kind of conversation. I've tried to do my part here over the years in, once it's known, like, oh, I work in nutrition, either I don't bring it up and, like, let's look at the horse over in the field and change the subject or something, but just trying to be, for those who do want to talk about nutrition and know, the work that I do, is trying to really be positive with the language and, take down the dieting talk. I'm sure this is from the episodes I've listened of you two, this is really important. Just the tone of the conversation, support vibe between one another, and trying to remove some of this negative, self-talk from the whole story.
Yeah, it's I know it's sort of like, it's bordering on like new age mindset work, but at the same time, it's so important because we are our most powerful influence, right? And, if you've listened to a few of the episodes, I'm sure you've come up with one of them where we kind of got some of Liz's internal voices out and realized that, like, a lot of times our internal voices are really mean to us, and you would never talk to anybody you cared about the way that you talk to yourself. And so it's I think, such a critical part of working through some of the diet mentality is recognizing where that stuff came from in the first place in your head, right? Like, is it a family member? Is it friends? Is it social circles you're in? Is it TV? Is it, where are you getting this messaging that you're not enough? Where are you getting this messaging that you have to be different? You have to change all the time. And is it valid, right? Like, is that really true? And I think it's a really, really nice thing to see in the health and wellness industry, particularly, that we're taking a step away from this punitive, I must change and be better, and everything about me is inadequate, to a more like additive process and holistic process of like, hey, maybe I've been going through something challenging and I should give myself some compassion for that. And maybe there's a medical diagnosis that I need to address, that if I do, I'll feel better and I don't have to feel guilty about it. I think some of these lifestyle related diseases bring up a lot of challenges for people.
For sure. That investigation that you're mentioning there, Chris, that's like deep, deep, deep work that I feel like a lot of people don't want to do or know that they need to do. Like, yeah, what is it that you think you will gain by losing the 30 pounds, and really diving into that story that we all have, whatever the context is, the expectations. But I think what a really great point you're bringing up is that, like, where do these beliefs originate? And I find oftentimes it's, years ago, right, in our youth and things like that have come up and then finally surface that we get to in our older years. Like, it's never too late to get into that stuff, but uncovering that element or those layers and peeling back, it's a lot of hard work, I think, for people, no matter where we've come from.
Yeah, not just ogres are like onions, right? Like people are like onions too. And it really does come down to how many layers are you willing to peel away and then build back up, right? So I think it would be a good time to start talking a little bit about your work with endurance athletes and some of the challenges that you see women facing in their master's years. Just for anybody who doesn't know what the term master's means, a master's athlete is just an athlete who is 40 or so, maybe sometimes 35 or so or older, and still trying to be competitive at some kind of sport or event. And I think there are a lot of us, right? There are a lot of master's athletes out there, and there isn't as much, especially for women, there isn't enough, I think, good advice around how to successfully do this and respect your hormones and the changes that you may be going through at the time, or some of these health diagnoses that you've had, and still compete. So I'd love to hear some of your input on that.
I think, one thing that's just coming out more and more is the appreciation for learning about your body from this aging perspective. I mean, we have aging that's happening nonstop, but then also our hormonal inputs or outputs, and this change from once we are around 40, or maybe it's a little older for some of us, but just the impact of the life cycle stage, that being like our perimenopause years. I mean, I think a lot of us in at least my generation, like, we weren't taught that stuff we don't talk about, and it was always like menopause is for old people that go away and they just stop living and functioning and we ignore them. And I think now with so many of us, trying to remain active for health purposes or enjoyment purposes, is how to still support that level of activity while we learn the impact. And it can go in all directions, but like, how does going through the perimenopause transition, what do I need to do differently with nutrition or my sleep or my programming exercise wise to support what I'm going through, so that all of these negatives that we've heard and that's been out in our society, that we turn into old, just worthless people, that conversation is shifting. So nutritionally, it's a lot. First of all, is just learning, like, well, because each of us is different, but each woman and what's going on from that hormonal profile can be dramatically different and then manifest in different ways, which can be quite dramatic for some people as far as, uncomfortable symptoms and things. So I think this first point is more like learning the impact and where you are in this whole life cycle stage, which I know is broad, hear what I'm saying, but hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think maybe let's let's try to get a little deeper on what are some of the perimenopause symptoms that people should be looking out for? Because I think this, like you said, this is just not something that was talked about. And even me, I'm 43, and I'm realizing that like this is coming for me pretty soon. And my body definitely did a big shift around 40 that I didn't anticipate. Like, because I felt like I was going pretty even keel. I mean, I had some orthopedic issues that have been more or less solved, but boy, does my body not recover the same, and it doesn't behave the same. And I can't say personally that I am super duper aware of what I should be looking for perimenopause symptoms.
It's all over. I think the last, when I looked at this, Chris, the list of potential symptoms, signs was something like 48 reported, everything from like more frequent migraines to, your sleep starts becoming more disrupted, or all the way to, the commonly heard hot flushes, night sweats, the brain fog. Some of those are things that have been out there. It's just so all over the place. But
it's like the COVID symptoms now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. But yeah, from what you're saying, we start to notice like, oh yeah, I'm not able to put out maybe the same level performance wise as what I could when I was 30, or the other things that start to shift as our estrogen and progesterone levels fluctuate is a change or loss, starting to lose or more easily lose lean muscle. And so that can be then, like, I'm like, this seems heavier than a couple years ago, the same, whatever, barbell weight that we're trying to deadlift or whatever. But so yeah, the symptoms can be quite numerous. And then there are some women who don't have anything happening until, like 50, 54 years young. Then all of a sudden, periods start to become more irregular, things like that.
So what are some of the things just, across the board that you would say are good preventive measures for kind of dealing with some of these symptoms, because, and I think we have to put out there that some amount of muscle loss is inevitable over the very long term, right? Mm-hmm. I think this is something that, even given the absolute best training program and best nutrition and best sleep and stress-free existence, like our bodies are aging and things are not going to stay exactly the same. So it's not about staying exactly the same, but it's about sort of attempting to optimize what you can be doing.
Yeah, definitely. Good point. So yeah, I would say one of the things is really looking at protein intake, and fill me in, Chris, how much you've talked about this before, and Liz too, as we age, trying to work with the aging component, which we know with every decade of life, we lose 5-10%. Depending, of our VO2 max, that there's significant changes with each decade. Nonetheless, we've got our exercise side and the nutrition side. So one of the big things that's been coming out in the research, over the last decade or even more is just the importance of including protein throughout all of our meals, fairly evenly distributed. But then especially for women is making sure that we're eating not only enough calories, regardless of the protein piece, we need to be eating enough and not getting into a low energy availability state, but also that protein piece to help combat some of the effects of our hormonal flux that occurs for some women up to 15 years in perimenopause state. So protein is one that we tend to, not want to think about. A lot of women just don't care for eating much protein, whether it's, animal or plant protein. But it's really important for a number of aspects, including bone health, brain, cognition, even some things along the lines of, thinking of our athletic scope here is working with lean muscle and trying to maintain some of that functional strength. So we have to have, both. We've got to have some smarter programming as we age, but also that protein, it comes up over and over. And I think it can be a challenge for a lot of us when we're starting to look at nutrition more closely.
I think it's really interesting that you bring up that women struggle a lot with consuming enough protein, because I've always, I was brought up mostly vegetarian. Sometimes we had chicken and then turkey on Thanksgiving, but pretty much like every meal was just plant-based protein, or really my mom to this day, I'm like, Mom, like if I go over to their house, I'm like, do you have anything that's like protein? And she's like, there's cheese. It's cheese on it. I'm like, Mom, this is why when I was a kid and like a teenager, we would just have like a fat and a carb and tons of vegetables, like vegetables from the gardens. But I would just be like, well, I am still hungry. Like 2 servings later, I'm like, I'm still hungry and I'm not at all satiated. And until really actually like since working with Chris, I realize now like the only way I feel satiated at all is if I eat meat protein. I can eat all the plant-based protein I want, and my brain is still like, well, I could eat more. But I struggle, and I'm sure hormonally it's like some sort of component to that, because during like once every month I get a weird chicken aversion where chicken makes me want to vomit. Meat sometimes just really grosses me out, and yet I'm like, I need to eat this because it's the only way I'm going to feel not hungry anymore.
Yeah. Another important element or bonus of protein, right, is for its satiety effect. Mm-hmm. That's good that you notice that with and without, and then maybe the different types, or how perhaps the influence of hormones affects your tolerance of certain foods.
I think this is one of the tricky parts with working on nutrition with women, is that we have this whole extra like kind of curveball going on in the background of like, well, this week chicken sounds fantastic and I could eat an entire one. And next week, I don't want to look at a chicken. And it's actually a chemical thing going on, right? Where your body's actually asking you for something specific. And I think this is one of the things we worked on a lot as well, is sort of identifying like, what is my body actually asking me for, and getting better in tune with those intrinsic cues, because, and we've talked about this before too, but we exist specifically in America in a culture that asks us routinely to not pay attention to our intrinsic body cues, right? Like, and I experienced this when I moved abroad for the first time, because I can remember in college, I would wake up and I would have something for breakfast, and then a friend would call me around 10 and be like, hey, let's go get some breakfast. And I was like, yeah, double breakfast, let's do that, right? And then my eating pattern was all over the map. And when I first moved abroad to Europe, like there are times where you eat and there are times where you are not eating culturally. And if you are eating outside of given times to eat in France, they will sarcastically bon appetit you until you feel so shamed that you put whatever you're eating down, because you don't eat outside of meal times. And this was such a big culture shock to me, that there were times for meals and they only happened a couple times a day. It wasn't a meal free for all. Right. And so there's this huge layer of cultural programming on top of all of this other hormonal programming that kind of we've learned to ignore, right? We've learned to ignore those internal body cues. And equally in France as well. Like if you're hungry at 3:00 and it's not eating time, you don't eat. So that's like the opposite end of the spectrum. But it's this idea that like your body's really, really good at knowing what it needs if you know how to listen to it. And it doesn't mean it's always right. I mean, ice cream's still going to sound good. Oh, yeah. So like your brain like going, yeah, get that we need that, right? We always need that. But like recognizing the difference between an opportunity that your body sees and genuine physical hunger is a really important skill that we work on a lot, right? Is like, hey, are you actually hungry, right? And this is how Liz kind of came to this idea of like, oh, wait a second. When I eat protein, I'm not constantly looking around for food, like wondering when the
protein.
Meat-based protein. Right. And it took some experimenting, right? It wasn't like you went straight for that and we didn't immediately decide that you were going to eat more meat, right? We did lots of things. And one of the first things you said was, you're going to pry the cheese out of my cold, dead hands. So,
my sister. That was actually my sister.
Was it, Tricia? Yeah. That's probably true. But you were like, amen.
If left to my own devices, I would probably not eat meat more than like twice a month, I would just go throughout my day eating like beans and vegetables and cheese. And that's really what I want. But then I never feel even like 80% full. I'm just like, it's very interesting to learn this about yourself, especially when you've been indoctrinated with like vegetarian ideals most of your life. And my sister's still a vegetarian, and I don't want to take anything away from that if it's working for people. But for me, I notice if I don't eat like meat specifically, I just do not feel okay. Especially red meat every like every other week or twice a week or once a week or something like that. There's these interesting components that I've just learned about, and then trying to reconcile what I know my body needs and wants and what I thought was ideal. Like I said, growing up with vegetarian ideals.
Yeah. And it can be a real deprogramming experience. Like, what I experienced when I moved abroad, and it was like, wait a second, like, I thought this was just how things were done everywhere, and it's not. Or, I thought being vegetarian was the best thing for me, but I'm finding out that that's not what my body's agreeing with. Some people really do thrive on vegetarian diets.
Yeah.
I don't happen to be one of them either. I've tried every different flavor of that possible. And for me, I'm in the same boat as you with the red meat, right? We've got frozen Dina again. There, she's back. Just in time for me to ask. I think it's important that we understand that protein is sort of the foundation of and I often use the car analogy. Like, protein is the building blocks of the car, right? It's the steering wheel and the wheels and the metal and the everything. Like, you need it to make the car, but you can't just put that in, right? You have to then have the workers, which are the vegetables and the vitamins and the nutrients that come with the vegetables. And then you need the energy to get the job done, right? You got to feed the workers. So that now we have carbs, and it's a really basic analogy, but how much protein should the average woman be eating? And I know it's very individual, and it's based on activity level and body weight and other factors, but just as a rule, how can I start to ascertain if I am indeed getting adequate protein or not?
Yes. Do you use, Chris, visuals sometimes, like the hand or palm?
Yeah.
I think that can be an easy way if we're like not trying to encourage counting and weighing and measuring everything. Like when I first started paying attention to nutrition way before I was in the field of nutrition, I remember just like, aim for the palm amount, right? And these guidelines have changed a bit, especially for getting into like the perimenopause years. So we could just call that master's years, because I'm not trying to put all women into this bucket based on reproductive cycle or any of that. But I find that and Liz, to your point too, vegetarian proteins can fit in this whole picture. So if it is beans or tofu or, other kinds of whole grains, things like this, trying to get a mix of fish, animal or other, animal derived sources. And then there are plant proteins. But I like to think about, the whole open hand as a starting point, and that being on each plate or bowl of our main meals throughout the day. But I'm also a fan of putting protein in with, if we are doing a snack, putting some protein in. And, that ends up being in the range of, 25 to 40 grams of protein per meal. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I'm hoping that it's far above the RDA of, protein, meeting our protein needs. So it's probably at least double what the RDA says that we need.
I think it's really important. Yeah, it's really important to talk about what the RDA is. And I don't think this is something we've ever talked about on the podcast before, but people look at the RDA as if it's a gold standard, but it was developed to be the line at which you are not deficient. Yeah. It's not an optimal intake line. It's a below this, you're in danger line, right? So if you're shooting only for the RDA, you're probably not getting adequate anything, right? It's the same thing with the 5 servings of vegetables a day. I know I've talked about it about vegetables, but it's like, that's a minimum to not generate problems,
Right.
long term, right? That's not an optimal amount of vegetables to be
Such
eating.
an important distinction. Such
Yeah.
an important distinction. Wow.
I think it's something to think about. And I'm just adding on to what you said, Chris, is like, do we want to feel adequate and like, I'm okay, I'm getting through this day? Or do we want to be more on the optimal side where it's like, oh yeah, bring on this day? I mean, I think nutrition could play a huge role in our everyday mojo, right? So it is trying to work towards that more optimal side, not trying to be in any sort of perfection bucket at all, but it's just trying to be better than adequate so that we can do all the things that we want to do every day.
Yeah. And I mean, if you have an off day once in a while too, I think it's important. It doesn't have to be like every single day you're absolutely exceeding expectations on everything. Like everybody's going to have a crappy day and eat some macaroni and cheese that doesn't have adequate protein in it. It happens, right? And I think this is the balance to strike, because for a long time, the narrative's been very polarized in nutrition. Either you're like compliant and 100% amazing and you're nailing your diet and you win, or you fail. And I think there needs to be such a bigger spectrum here of because this is what, when we talk about balanced eating, I think it's important to really be clearer about defining that for people, because dieting is not balanced eating, right? Let's just put that out there. It's not balanced eating. It's one extreme. You're eliminating macronutrient categories or large amounts of calories, or you're not able to participate in specific events with your family because of your diet. That's extreme. Right? That's not what balanced eating looks like. Balanced eating means I can afford to eat Thanksgiving dinner because the rest of the time I'm getting adequate or above nutrition into my person.
That is so important, Chris. And it is tied to the flexibility piece. And I feel like we all have a story or 1 million stories like, oh yeah, I've done that diet, or I learned what it's like to be restrained, constrained, whatever limiting term you can think of. And it really doesn't need to be that way in order to achieve feeling better and being able to, live hopefully without disease or minimal sort of, any sort of medical condition. And so I think that can be hard waters to tread, right? No, especially when we throw in the anecdotes and the influencers and the like.
Show me a 45-year-old influencer who's doing that stuff and also has a family and a house and pets and any kind of interests. I want to see that person. I want a 24-hour feed of their day.
There we go.
That's what I want, because I don't want your highlight reel. I don't want the day where you're nailing it.
I'm going to throw someone under the bus. Jillian Michaels.
Oh, Liz has a lot of feelings about Jillian Michaels, right? And I think this is the fitness world of the 90s and early 2000s, right? It's that she was absolutely the thing to strive for in that period of time. And I just think things have changed. I think
Jillian Michaels is like what a lot of women have in their heads. Just constantly berating them and their choices and telling them that they need to suck it up and be better and be not such a loser.
I mean, that was coaching for a long time, right?
She's still doing that, to throw her completely, she's still doing that.
Yeah. And I think it's, you've seen this actually in the news recently. I can't remember what country it was, but I think it was a gymnast, or was it an ice skater, where she had pushed herself so hard because her coach was constantly berating her, and it became this international issue. And the coach was actually skating, right? Was it ice skating?
The Olympians, the Russian Olympians. Yeah.
And in my experience in coaching these kinds of high level athletes as well, you do still see a lot of coaches coaching this way because that's how they were coached, right? They're not doing it out of malice. They're not doing it because they think it's, wrong. They're doing it because they think that this is the best way to get optimum performance out of somebody. And I think.
But what about? So if we're talking figure skating or gymnastics, it's not just what's your optimum performance we can get out of you. It's much more also what can you look like, and how thin can you be in the tight little outfits.
I think it's very intertwined, and it's much more intertwined than you think, because the belief is that you have to look that way to perform a certain way. Right? Not looking that way means you can't possibly perform that way. But we've seen that that's
people
not
really
true
believe
in a lot
that?
of athletes.
Yeah,
yes,
we have
very,
examples
very
that that's not true.
Right. But it's very prevalent, and I think
sad.
I talk about this a lot, and this kind of brings us right back around to endurance athletes and performance. And there's this really great book I read a really long time ago called Slow Fat Triathlete. And it's about this woman who really wanted to compete in triathlon, but felt really like she couldn't because she was heavier and she didn't have the optimum body fat percentage. And so for a long time, she didn't compete, even though once she started competing, she may not have been the fastest and she may not have always podiumed, but she was like loving doing it and really wanted to keep doing it and get better. And so instead of basing herself off of an aesthetic or off of perceptions about what the sport should look like, she just based it off of her own performance and her own improvements, right? Because, I think this is another topic we could talk about forever, but it's so preventative and prohibitive when there is a specific aesthetic that is tied to a specific sport. Yes, okay, are big, strong guys better at rugby? Yeah, because you don't really want to be in a scrum and be a tiny guy. It's dangerous, right? Same thing goes for other sports. Like there are specific body shapes that might be more conducive to higher performance in that sport, and you don't have control of that. Like, sorry, that's just an unfortunate reality. We don't have a lot of control over our fundamental physiology. But what we do have control over is our perception of our performance in that sport based off of those factors, right? So when we talk about high level performance, we talk about like an aesthetic, especially for figure skaters. Like we look at the reason why figure skaters are supposed to be light is because men are throwing them around. Right?
Well,
the lighter you are.
Only pairs though.
Right.
If you're a solo female figure skater, which that one was we were talking about, is there a reason why
I think it's just a
couldn't be
holdover.
more than 90 pounds?
I think it's a holdover, and I think it also stems from the idea that women don't carry muscle or shouldn't carry muscle. And the reality of that is that it makes women less competitive because we don't fuel adequately, and therefore we don't gain enough muscle, and then we don't compete as well, versus it being a physiological hold back, right?
And just the what I do know of figure skating, and you could say the same thing with ballet and most female sports where they're judged a lot on like their physical appearance, which is pretty much a lot of female sports. You are seen, if you are more muscular, what I have noticed is that you're seen as not graceful. So if you have more muscle,
double standards, right?
Yeah, and it's like, are they less graceful, or is it just they're holding more muscle, so you perceive them as less graceful, or is it actually like it's just really tricky with those things like figure skating and things like gymnastics and anything that's not what WNBA or.
But all of these sports have their own specific culture that has evolved over a long period of time with standards and criteria that made sense when we knew less, right? When we had anecdotal evidence or we had high performers, we just modeled the next generation of high performers off of the last generation of high performers, right? It's not, again, I don't think it's malice. I think it's just tradition almost, right? If that's the word to use here, it's just how things have been done. And I've come up against this in multiple Olympic sports where talking with coaches and asking about their process and, what their training program looked like so I could support them with nutrition and that kind of thing. A lot of times the answers are like, well, this is just how this is done. I don't know why I'm programming this way. I don't know why I'm asking my athletes to hit these targets. And so when I started asking more of these questions, it started leading to some really good conversations with coaches about why this is the way it is and why they thought that particular protocol worked for them. And if they think it's working for their female athletes, for example, or if it's not, like what kind of performance are you getting out of this? And so I think there's a lot of work to be done in that area, which is, why talking about something like women's endurance sports, I think is super important, because I think especially in endurance sports, the idea of an endurance athlete is very, very lean. When in reality, and I hope Dina's going to back me up here. I hope this is what I've learned anyway, is that the reality is that there's an optimum amount of body fat you should carry for an endurance event. And below that, it actually inhibits your performance. Right. So if you're super, super lean and you're running for a really long time, your body's hopefully burning fat. But if you're not carrying any, it can't burn that. And so it's going to turn to something else, and it's likely going to be muscle.
Definitely. I was just thinking of something too, when we were talking about sport specific and some of the notions we have of the body shape that fits into that sport. Just thinking more broadly for, aging women, and I'm much older than you both. So it's like, well, what is it that we think we are going to look like as women in menopause, whether we're endurance athletes or not, doesn't matter. But there's this stereotype or stigma or whatever that, we just stop doing sport once we're in our late 40s or early 50s because we're not strong anymore and we're, weak and all this stuff. And so I think this is huge. This movement that's been emerging here is being strong. And it doesn't mean you have to be bulked up or anything. It's just like, functionally strong, being able then to carry that over into sport of choice or activity of choice and keep this population growing, like participation wise in endurance sport or otherwise, so that we are changing the whole paradigm of what it is to be an aging female in menopause or postmenopause.
Yeah. And if you have questions about this stuff, like absolutely seek out somebody who has knowledge about it, because there is some knowledge about it now. I think maybe 20, 30 years ago, again, these topics were taboo still. Right. And we've seen such a huge, amazing shift in women coming out and saying, hey, like I deserve to know how my physiology works, and I deserve to find out if it's normal from other people. And I deserve to understand it and do my best with it. Right. And we're not done at 45 or 50. Right. This is ridiculous. We're living longer than men. We're outliving them. So we're clearly not done yet. Right. Like there's a lot to do still. And I think this idea of strength for women is super amazing too. I remember being the only woman in the weight room in college. Like it was really uncomfortable, and I could tell 1,000,001 stories about what it was like to be somebody who lifted reasonably heavy at the time and to be female in the weight room. It's been a journey. It's been a journey.
Yeah.
So it's so good to see so many younger women putting aside the smaller is better mentality and getting really into strength. It makes my little soul so happy,
Yes. And definitely. And so nutrition, just to come back to that a little bit here, is like, well, we don't necessarily need to be eating less or eating light. Of course, that all needs to be tailored to our activity and so forth, but fueling the body to support the strength that we desire, or, if it's more endurance focused, that goes along with the strength piece. But even just health wise, right? Protecting bone, it's staying, upright instead of hunched over as I sit here all.
It's hard on the podcast because you like lean in, you're like, oh.
Yeah. I know. But just how much these things go together along with mindset and all of that as well.
Yeah. And I think this is what's so great about this time in nutrition and fitness and strength, right? Is that women are beginning to have more of a voice, and we are starting to take control of some of this stuff. I think the last hurdle really is this component of like, yeah, okay, we want to be strong now, but we're not willing to eat adequately to gain the strength, right? Like this is probably one of the most common things I deal with not just my athlete clients, but with my regular people clients too. And I kind of hate that distinction. I hate having to be like athletes and regular people, like women, right? People who like to do things with their bodies at all are my clients, right? So like this idea that like, I'm going to continuously eat less, but lift more, and that's going to make me stronger. I think this is the next big thing that needs to die, right? Like, let's put that one out there and just never let it back in, because it's at the end of the day, it's physics, right? Like, it's the laws of thermodynamics. Energy is not either gained nor lost. So if you're not putting it in, you can't use it.
Exactly right.
So, sorry, soapbox moment for me. This is definitely a topic that's incredibly close to my, my heart and my career and everything I do, especially working with women, just getting these women to eat. So let's talk really quickly about like, what does an adequate food intake look like? I know what I tell my clients, right? But I want them to hear it from somebody else working in nutrition who has much more medical background than someone like me as a nutrition coach. Like, what is an adequate calorie intake for the average 5'4", 140-pound female?
Well, so Chris, do you do more calculation, like a quantitative guideline? Is that typically what you
Not
provide?
typically,
Or
but people really ask for it very regularly, right? Because of the diet mentality. This is the number one thing people ask for, right? It's like, but
because I'm like, ooh, I'm not going to answer that. I don't like the quantitative answer. Like it's X calories per pound and then subtract whatever if you're looking. So I really look at quality and frequency of meals. I look at nutrition around exercise, maybe the eating window, if that is, if we are, needing maybe some of the behavioral changes there, I'll look at eating window. So I'm just kind of dancing around the answer a little bit to carefully say, like, I don't want to give a number based on a height.
Right.
We should tell Dina about our Noom experience.
Oh, I meant to.
Did you listen to the Noom episode?
I didn't get to yet. It's on in my queue here.
The reason I bring it up is because I think for some people, when you feel really lost with what you should be eating, right? Because you'll hear all sorts of things all across the map. Like you should eat more, you should eat less, you should eat protein, you should only eat protein, you should never have carbs, you should always have carbs, you should be vegetarian, right? It's like, it becomes this sea of confusion, I find, for a lot of clients. And they just come in and they're like, just tell me what to eat. And so what we do, like through Precision Nutrition's program, right? We have a baseline. It's like, this is a foundation. We're going to try something close to this and see how you feel. And then we're going to assess, right? Did you feel extra full? Did you not feel very full? Were you hungry 2 hours after you ate? Were you hungry an hour after you ate? Did you not want food again for 9 hours? Like, let's establish a foundation that we have a data set to go from, right? Like, first things first, you have to have a control group. So what are you doing now, right? And then what can we add to that? And is it adequate, right? Do you feel an energy slump? Do you have a headache at 4 o'clock? Like, looking at some of these different markers for what adequate nutrition looks like, I think is what people are looking for, right? So, Liz and I are going to have a moment here about calorie counting, but I think the thing for decades has been calorie counting. And so people are very, very comfortable with the idea of 1,200 calories or I shouldn't exceed 2,000 calories. And like you immediately have a response just like me of like, oh, right? So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you. I'm looking at quality. Of course, I set a foundation and I rarely will convey that in numbers. Oftentimes I'm looking at things that you just mentioned. So it's all the touchy-feely. How hungry are you when you wake up? What do you feel like energy-wise? Are you feeling cravings, fatigue? You can run down the list, but I try not to ask like yes or no, right? It's more collecting, go journal for a few days and just write what it is you feel. And I almost don't even need to know what you're eating specifically. It's like, how are you feeling with how you're fueling? Of course, the food, comes into the picture here.
And journal without judgment, I want to put out there, right?
Definitely. And so, on my side, and it's not like there's secrets here because it's aligned with what you do too, Chris. It's then ensuring like, we can work within an energy range, but that we're not robots. We're not living and, moving the same way every day. So this calorie goal is going to be so fluid and dynamic. I don't like to put those targets on anyone and instead look at the timing and the type, but translate it to what can you eat more of, said protein or more carbohydrate and protein around your training. And, it looks like you're starting your day a little light. Can we gradually, boost or change, how you start every single day instead of it's this meal plan and you follow it for the same way every day. Because that's we're not robots, right? So oftentimes then that will
Absolutely.
carry to looking at micronutrients, because that's really important, especially as we're getting into our 40s and beyond, is making sure that we're not missing out. So there's such a focus on macros, which I appreciate, but we often forget about all of these supportive micronutrients and the interplay of genes and activity and aging and hormonal shifts and so forth. So there's a lot of layers there that we can tackle without counting and measuring food.
I think I just want to put out there as well for people listening, like, I did not prep Dina in any way on any of these topics. Okay. Like, if what she's saying sounds a lot like what we're talking about a lot of the time, it's because this is really, where the truth of the science of nutrition intersects with the experience of being a human being, right? And I think the tendency often is like, I want a solution. I have a problem. I want a solution now. Tell me exactly what it is that's going to solve my problem. And unfortunately, when it comes to human physiology and the lived experience of people, it's never a black and white answer. There is no one size fits all. It's just not something we can say, hands down, this is the right diet for everyone, right? And I feel like it's a theme that runs through this podcast regularly, right? It's the absolute truth of it is you have to learn your own body. And as it stands right now, you are still the greatest expert on you that exists. And so it may feel like hard work, and it may not be something you want to tackle all at once, but doing that work on yourself and figuring out how your physiology responds, how your body responds, how your emotional state responds to these different things is the answer. It is the answer. I feel like I've never quite come out and said it that way before, but that is the answer. It's you have to do this work if you want the results. And every athlete I know that's been extremely successful has done this work.
I'm just going to echo what you said because I couldn't have said it any better.
Oh, thanks. I think this has been a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to having you back on because I think there are a couple very specific topics we would like to discuss. We didn't quite get to PCOS today or some of the other, big lifestyle disease questions and conversations. So I think it would be great to have you back on to talk about that again. But if you just had one or two things like takeaways from today or really important things you wanted to leave people with, what would it be?
So I think Chris and Liz, thank you again for having me on. And I've been honored to be with you for this time. But I think one thing that comes out over and over, and it ties to what you just ended with, which is trying to listen to what your body is trying to tell you. How you do that, I think we have so many preconceived notions of what that even means, right? And so if we can just be free from what the app says or what, the influencer says or social media, stream is telling you, but just stepping back and really trying to get in touch with what it is you're experiencing day to day. And it's not okay to be suffering. So if you have something that you feel is like not a major complaint, but it's enough to make your life not feel great or your 2 hours of the morning not great, I think that is you are worth it. So trying to work with someone who can help you, whoever that person is fantastic, to just you're worth it and pursuing that line of therapy or treatment or solution. So I think just listening and really taking the time to learn about yourself and try some things, whether that is nutrition or training or some other therapy or, healing process. We all need that and are worth it.
Absolutely. Well said. What do you think, Liz? Yeah. What are your takeaways?
It's just, pleasure to have you on, Dina. And I felt like we just kind of got back to that vein that we've been working in and getting just, you can't say this information enough because we're so inundated with the opposite all the time. And it's we need to rehear this over and over in many different ways, over and over and over. So it's just really good, really reinforcing, and I'm really glad we got to talk about it today.
Absolutely. So if somebody wanted to work with you, Dina, how would they go about doing that?
Oh, thank you, Chris. My website is probably the best place to start, which is nutritionmechanic.com. So you can find my contact info over there and check out the services that we offer.
Awesome. Do you have an Instagram account or a TikTok account or?
I'm not on TikTok, but Instagram, I'm a little bit come and go with that lately. Just there's a lot of noise there. So sometimes I feel like, am I adding to the noise or trying to be helpful here? But Nutrition Mechanics, my handle over on Instagram. And that.
Is that spelled right on the
Yes.
I'm not good at spelling.
That looks right.
That's right. You got it.
Okay. I don't have to spell mechanic often in my life.
Thank you.
Well, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed talking with you, and I can't wait to see you again lifting big, heavy things at the gym.
Thank you so much. You both are a delight.
Right.
Thanks for all you're doing as well.
Thank you for being on.
All right. Have a great night.
Thank you.